some of these critics, these pundits.
I absolutely adore them lads. I have unbelievable time for them, but they're a great bunch, but it's not acceptable.
I'd like to play the hard man when they're on it. It's not very pleasant when you're trying to manage a team. All you're looking for is a bit of civility and a bit of decency, but they just miss you like you have nothing to do with the bloody occasion.
Larry Burr, how are you?
How you on, lads? Are you well?
Yeah, what's the crack? It's all coming up awfully.
I don't know. Is it though? I mean, obviously two massive finals coming up, but they have to be won now at this stage. That's what Leo O'Connor was saying after the under-20s won the Leinster final last week against Wexford, and they've got the Joe McDonagh Cup final against Carlow, where I think they'll play a very different team to the one that they lined out in the last round of the group stages, and that's a chance to go back up to the Leinster Championship for Offaly for the first time since 2018, and then they've got a chance to complete the set. They've never won the under-21/under-20 grade. They've won the minor and the All-Ireland Senior in the past, but they've got that opportunity with a team who are probably well ahead of schedule at this stage, Jared. This is 15 of the minor team from last year who are involved in the panel, who've still got 2 more years after this year at under 20 level. So definitely there's a feeling that they've done extremely well. They would have been expected maybe to contest in Leinster, but to come from tier 2 in the Leinster Championship at the start, to win Leinster last week and then get to an All-Ireland final is remarkable. And I think the ticket sales are already going really well for the 4 counties ahead of what's now going to be a double header at Semple Stadium, the minor and the under-20 final on the Sunday of the bank holiday, which should be a great day for hurling as well.
Yeah, that is great. So, like, obviously the county board chairman is such a messianic figure that he's getting a lot of praise, but there was obviously work going on before he arrived, and he's kind of really helped to empower everybody who's involved in underage hurling and football. So while Duignan gets a good bit of the credit, there was obviously something happening, because they started winning straight away when he got there, and obviously some work had been done before he got there. So what else is happening, Will?
Yeah, I mean, look, to give Michael Duignan credit as well, because people will say, look, obviously the previous regime had to have the building blocks in place before he came in, and now he's reaping all of that work at this stage. He was heavily involved on the fundraising committee for the Faithful Fields, which has been seen as a real cornerstone of this. There's now a training centre which has allowed standards to be improved, and also for players, just talking to them, to have certainty about it, because up until now, many of the teams were having to travel even outside the county for training sessions during the season. Now they've got a base that's as good as any county team has around the country in the Faithful Fields. And then I think you add the feel-good factor on top of it as well, aside from the fact that there were some very good players coming through, and the previous regime had appointed some of the managers that were in place at the start of this successful period in both football and hurling. But you have to take into account the kind of feel-good factor of things like the Shane Lowry sponsorship, the Glenisk sponsorship, all those kind of bits and pieces, and the high standards that have been driven along the way, even to the point that last week Leo O'Connor, the under-20 manager, was making the point that the county board and Michael Duignan had arranged for a Garda escort from Portlaoise to Carlow to ensure that they were there in time for the warm-up, and that there was no possibility that they were going to be stuck in a bus in traffic trying to get to the match. It's those kind of little details, and it's not just Michael Duignan, but it's the current administration that are there that have put those things in place that have actually helped Offaly to climb back up the ladder a little bit. I would say, particularly when it comes to hurling though, you have to be fair in saying that they probably were below their level a little bit when they went to the Christie Ring originally. To have won that, to try and now get out of the Joe McDonagh, they won Division 2A of the league twice but didn't stay up in Division 1 the year that they were up there last. In the football they did get to Division 2 but were relegated back down to Division 3. I think the key is now, if they're to get some of those achievements of the last 3 seasons, say to get up in the top 2 flights in the football, or to get back into Division 1, which they will be next year in the league, the trick now is to actually stay there and not become a yo-yo team. So plenty of progress, but probably still plenty more to do as well. Can't help but get a little bit excited about the style of play of this under-20 team though. They play really, really nice hurling, very progressive hurling, and look, everyone's hyping Adam Screeney at this stage, and the kid at just turned 18 years of age seems to have no problem about the pressure that's put around him as well. A lot of people were marvelling at the scores that he hit down at Dr. Cullen Park against Wexford last week. He has the skills to pay the bills, Ger.
Yeah, don't be hyping the kids though too early in GAA. It's a bit trickier than it is in soccer. One last thing about the senior team. Am I right in saying that they had to beat Kildare in the league final to get the promotion? Like, their 2 seasons have diverged so spectacularly that, like, it's such a tenuous thing, like, here you are looking up, Kildare looking down, and we can see this in the power rankings, but that turned out to be an absolutely massive sliding doors moment this season.
I agree. I mean, I think 10 or 12 minutes into the game, Kildare looked really impressive in that league final in O'Moore Park. And you're thinking this is the possibility that Kildare are going to go to Division 1 hurling for next season. And then Offaly kind of just slowly but surely wrestled control during the game. And I think one of the key players in that match was Keelan Kiley, who has come back. He's recovered from a concussion after the Kerry game, and I believe he's going to be available to play in the Joe McDonagh Cup final on Saturday evening, which is good for Offaly. I think Owen Cahill is also going to be past fit to play. So their two most important players will be around this time. And they've really been the cornerstone of the success that the senior team have had this year in the league. Owen Cahill scores and Keelan Kiley just kind of driving things from a bit further back down the field. So that win against Kildare certainly seems to have taken the air out of their season entirely. Kildare had such a disappointing campaign in the Joe McDonagh. To be relegated back to the Christie Ring is a huge disappointment. To go from, as you say, a couple of months ago, genuinely looking at going up to the top table of hurling in the league to now dropping down to the third flight is so disappointing for Kildare.
Okay, let's get into the power rankings. The last page: Meath 18, Kildare 17, Down 16, Kerry 15, Laois 14, down 1, Offaly 13, down 1. Why are they down 1? What's there? Is there?
I think you have to respect Carlow's form. Now I know Carlow were playing against an Offaly team which was heavily weakened in the last round. Carlow scored 31 points on average per game in the Joe McDonagh so far this year. They drew against Kerry and against Laois. They've beaten Offaly, and then they put big scorelines up on everyone else. So Carlow were coming into this final on Saturday afternoon in really good form, and I think they probably should be considered the narrow favourites based on the form they've shown the last 4 or 5 weeks.
All right, you've got Carlow ahead of Offaly. There's nothing. You're not yarring away anything here. I don't think there's any error there. I'd be the first one to say you can't read a huge amount into the game where Carlow were comfortable winners, but Offaly had, I think, only 4 of the starters from the week before against Kerry. So you have to take that into account, but you also have to respect Carlow's form. We're going to just go through this, then we'll come back to it. Antrim are 11, Westmeath are 10, Wexford are 9, Dublin are 8, Waterford are 7. So Wexford, despite the fact they're beaten by Westmeath, are still ahead of them.
Yeah, but I think Westmeath getting a jump in the table respects what they did in the second half of that game at the weekend. I was working it and I just couldn't believe half-time. You're just thinking 16 points. It was 17 points just before half-time. This is dead. At this stage, Wexford are already probably putting one eye, and maybe that was part of it, about trying to ambush Kilkenny next week and still qualify for the All-Ireland series. And then Westmeath win that second half by 4 goals and 13 points to 5 points, which is just unbelievable, really. And like Niall Mitchell, I believe at this stage, he's just come back from knee surgery, so he's far from fit. Now, normally he would start in the half-forward line, but also Westmeath without 2 of their best players in Angus Clark and also Killian Doyle, their captain, their All-Star nominee from last year. He's not available. So they went very simple tactics for the last 10 or 15 minutes. Niall Mitchell, bring him on, stick him in around the square, and everyone, I think, probably saw the Sunday game, saw what he could do. They got long ball into him. They decided to go remarkably direct, and he somehow pulled the ball into the ice. That'll be the big disappointment for Wexford. It wasn't like they were beaten by 2 stunning goals towards the end of the game. They were 2 goals that probably should have been defended. But it puts Westmeath in a very good position for a third successive year in the Liam McCarthy. And as we know earlier this year, despite some of the hammerings they took in Division 1A, they still managed to put a performance in against Laois to stay in Division 1 of the Hurling League. So this is sustained for Westmeath, and I'm sure there's going to be plenty of counties, maybe even his native county Wexford, who'll be looking at Joe Fortune at this stage and the job he's done with Westmeath, because to manufacture staying up with the injuries that they've had this year would be a remarkable achievement. I would say it's definitely above even winning the Joe McDonagh a couple of years ago.
Was there any hope before the match, Will, within Westmeath? Do you think that a result like this was close for Westmeath, or was it obviously the hope was gone at half time from their minds, but pre-game, was there any hope in Westmeath?
Well, I think the feeling from talking to some of the players was they drew with Wexford last year in Mullingar, so there was that feeling that if they were going to give a bloody nose to one of the top teams in Leinster, it probably wasn't going to be against Galway or Kilkenny, but still it was a huge ask to go to Wexford Park. Westmeath hadn't beaten Wexford in the championship since 1940. Like, I would put last Sunday down as the best result that Westmeath have ever had at senior hurling, and you add in the fact it's the biggest championship comeback of all time, adds that little bit of a cherry on top for the comeback too. But yeah, but like, you kind of thought when Conor McDonald put in the 2 goals, you're thinking Wexford are going to put up a huge scoreline here, and they had raced to 2 goals and 13 points within the game. I didn't see it. Our commentary team, when I was going back to them at half time, were almost groaning, thinking, oh, this could be a 20-point defeat with the way things have gone. But they rallied hugely in that second half, and it makes the relegation situation going into this weekend particularly interesting. Obviously there's been a lot of commentary about what would happen if Wexford were to go to the Joe McDonagh. Wexford will still stay up if they draw, because they would finish ahead of Antrim on head-to-head if that was to happen. But if Wexford were to be beaten by Kilkenny, it's very, very possible that Antrim beat Westmeath in Mullingar. If that happens, Wexford are going into the Joe McDonagh for next year, which I don't think anyone who watched them in an All-Ireland semi-final lads against Tipperary in 2019 would have thought that 4 years later Wexford would be battling on the last day just to stay at All-Ireland level.
Yeah, I don't think there's a piece in the Indo today. I don't have it in front of me, but they're just making the point that this shouldn't be the case. That, like, you can't have Wexford dropping down. They've had an injury crisis, and really, it's not like that. Surely this is not the whole point of this.
Well, are you saying then that relegation should be put off? Like, what about teams who've been relegated in the last few years, like Lee, Shoffley, Westmeath, Carlow, Antrim, Kerry?
Martin Brownlee says it's ridiculous. Because
why though? Because of Wexford's history.
I think specifically it's an injury crisis. This isn't that the game's gone in Wexford, and they're not doing an awfully.
That's European. That's Super League stuff. Keeping Wexford in just because they're Wexford.
Yeah, but we on this very slot many times we've talked
circumstances.
We've spoken, lads, about the fact that there has to be a pathway for teams to try and close the gap with the top. So if we get to a point where there's protectionism, which there already is in the Munster Championship where there's no relegation, if we get to a point where Leinster doesn't have relegation just because Wexford have fallen into trouble in one season, does that not rip away the entire integrity of the competition?
Well, there needs to be a plan made somehow to fix this. It does feel like there's a lip service paid to promoting hurling in the counties outside the top tier anyway. But look, we have 5 minutes left and we haven't even got the first page here.
I know, but hurling is promoted ridiculously strongly in Wexford. If it is a case of just one bad season and we take the injuries they've had and right down the spine of their team, they have had a lot of injuries, Wexford will surely go to the Joe McDonagh next season and will come straight back up.
Yeah. What if next season is the last season that we get to see all their great players play one great season and they don't even get the opportunity to compete?
Well, then they have to rebuild. They were in a Leinster under-20 final only last week, so if it means that new players have to come in to replace that old blood, if it means they have to have a change of management, so be it.
Cry me a river, says Larry Burr. Cry me a river. An awfully shaped river all the way down.
I've watched this happen, lads, so
Die the Slaney. Listen, page 1, right?
Yeah.
So Waterford haven't moved. I think Waterford are actually below Dublin at this stage, given that Dublin are going to be still in the All-Ireland series more than likely at the end of all this.
I did consider that, and in fairness to Dublin, this has been a good first campaign under Meall as well, to be assured going into the last weekend that they're in the All-Ireland series at the very least. They can have a shot at Galway this weekend, and if they beat Galway, they could go to a Leinster final. So I think
you might be the highest person on Waterford in the country at the moment. Are you just trying to balance out Scahill?
I don't know about that. There's even a few people who are trying to claim in our live stream in the Hurling Pod at the weekend, and this seems to be the idea. Maybe Davy's got a plan for Tipperary this weekend. Maybe Waterford have a kick, even though they've nothing to play for.
But how low? You can't put Waterford any lower than just below Dublin.
I think
8th would be fair. We did consider, because we kind of consulted on this within the group as to where we were going to put them. We did consider putting them to 8th. I think once Dublin go through to the All-Ireland series, next Power Rankings is a good chance.
Is this the consensus rankings from the Hurling Pod?
Absolutely not. There was no consensus to be found because Scahill again fumed about the fact that Galway are sitting in 5th, despite the fact they've gone up just after beating Antrim in the last round, who they would have been expected to beat, and Murphy was making an argument for Kilkenny still being in 2nd. So,
so Limerick are 1.
There was consulting a little bit.
Limerick are 1, Clare are 2, Kilkenny are 3, Tip are 4, Galway are 5, and Cork are 6. Cork are down 2. So you think Cork are going out this weekend?
I do. I can't see Cork beating Limerick at the weekend. It's unfortunate because Cork have been really entertaining in the Championship so far, and this is a good Cork team, but this is the cutthroat nature of the Munster Championship, where at least one good team was going to miss out on a place in the All-Ireland series, and I think Limerick are going through in 3rd, and both Carlow and Offaly won't want to draw them in a preliminary quarter-final. Limerick will remember that in 2018, lads, they came through from this position, 3rd in Munster, won the All-Ireland Championship, and they could potentially do that again, despite the fact that obviously they haven't performed to the standard that maybe we would have expected at the start of the Championship. I still think Limerick will have enough for Cork this weekend, and that's harsh on Cork, who've drawn against a very good Tipperary team, were within a puck of a ball against Clare at the weekend. But importantly, I think Clare should have won by a bigger margin than just that long Dermot Ryan point. I thought Clare were very much in control in the 2nd and 3rd quarters of that game. They'll be disappointed with some of the goals they conceded against Cork. I think unfortunately for Cork, who I bet a good fancy for going into Championship to qualify, they're going out this weekend.
Clare have gone up 1, as you said, Will, from 3rd to 2nd, but are they unlucky not to be top of the pile at the moment? I know Limerick, of course, everyone still expects to go on and maybe lift Liam McCarthy, but I mean on very recent form, Clare could be number 1.
Yeah, maybe a little bit. I think first and second are as close as they've been since the Munster final last year. Clare's record in the Munster Championship round robin is intimidating. They've played 16 games and won 11 of them. They're ahead of even Limerick over the course of the 4 round robins. The next step for Clare is to build on that and win a piece of silverware, whether that be the Munster Championship in a few weeks' time. They're qualified for the final. They've got the last weekend off to put their feet up, have a look at the opposition around them. Looks like there's a strong chance that Tipperary will qualify for the final, and Liam Cahill is going to be suspended, not just from the sideline for that Munster final, but from preparing the Tipperary team for the 4 weeks to come. So we'll see what impact that has. I don't know how that's policed. I'm not sure when Dan Shanahan got a similar ban for Laois a few weeks ago, that was policed, that he couldn't be at trainings and so on. But if Liam Cahill doesn't win his appeal against that suspension, it means that Tipperary will be without their manager for a possible Munster final. Clare came so close to winning the Munster Championship final last year. They would love to get that silverware, go directly on a path to an All-Ireland semi-final, and potentially avoid Tipperary further on within the championship as well. I think Kilkenny in third is just the fact that they're motoring along. Again, they kept Dublin at arm's length at the weekend. They're pretty much through to a Leinster final, and they've got the chance, and Paul Murphy was keen to point this out, to bury Wexford at the weekend, and he thinks that's enough motivation for Kilkenny to go for the win.
Wow, that is wow.
Well, Wexford have won a couple of games against them recently, Ger.
Recently, they've won about 2 in 100 years, it feels like, and that is like saying the quiet bit out loud. Wow.
Oh yeah, I had to press him on it on the live show at the weekend. It was, will Kilkenny have the motivation to beat Wexford, even if Kilkenny know they're pretty much into a Leinster final? It would take a huge mathematical change in scoring for them not to qualify, and he said this is a chance to put Wexford down.
Okay, sorry, one last thing for you. Kilkenny's path to the All-Ireland now is more than likely going to feature Limerick in a semi-final if they get over Galway in the Leinster final. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a strong possibility. It takes away that certainty that you would have had in the last few years where Limerick were winning Munster championships. If you knew you won Leinster, you go the other side of the draw. Limerick aren't an issue until you get to an All-Ireland final. This time round, though, because Limerick will go into the preliminary quarterfinals, they can go back into your stream again. So for Kilkenny, the benefit of winning the Leinster championship will be to avoid Clare or Tipperary. But I think winning your provincial still has the big advantage of going directly to a semi-final. I think we saw the freshness for both Kilkenny and Limerick was important in the semis last year. Clare definitely looked like the tank had been emptied in their run to an All-Ireland semi-final. So I think even if it means that Limerick are a potential opponent if Limerick come through the longer path, you'd still prefer to be straight into a semi-final, I think.
Is it guaranteed that the losers of the... No, it's not guaranteed. Nothing's basically guaranteed except that the Leinster will play the third place team in Munster. The beaten Leinster... Am I right about that? Am I mixing that up?
No, so the third team in Munster and the third team in Leinster will be drawn against one of the two Joe McDonagh winners in a preliminary quarter-final. I'm not sure exactly how the quarter-finals shape up after that, but we have to wait to see the draw to see which side they're going to go. Okay,
all right. Will, good stuff. Thanks a million.
Enjoyed it. Thanks, lads.
More from Will, of course, on the Hurling Pod, and you can get that wherever you get your podcasts. And obviously those live Sunday evening streams are going great guns. Make sure you tune into that.